Welcome, everybody, to 26.1 AI Podcasts. Today we have managing partner of Rakuten's venture arm, Saemin, on joining us from Singapore. Welcome, Saemin.
Hello, hello. It's a good morning here. How are you?
Good afternoon here in the South Puget Sound.
Cool, cool.
Why don't you give some background on what you're working on, your title, and the company you work for?
Cool. Yeah. So my name is Saemin. I run the financially oriented arm of venture capital on inside the corporation of Rakuten Corp. We're a Japanese, mainly e-commerce plus fintech plus travel player in Japan and global. I founded this fund about 7 years ago. Basically retooled the strategic investment fund to be a very, very fast, agile early stage investment vehicle. We ended up, really, really loving tech banded companies and really ended up investing in a lot of AI and ML companies very early on. Actually, one of our investments is Algorithmia, which is indeed in Puget Sound. And we've started to understand, how we develop a cadence and a rhythm for investment for private placements that doesn't follow necessarily the herd, but we try to understand what is the theme that will arise as something that's really value add to society.
Now, in terms of your structure, do you have a single LP then, or how do you work? How are you structured?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we indeed have one LP, and that is Rakuten Corp. How we're developed, and the reason why I say private placement is that we're not only beholden to venture capital assets, which is still a private placement, but we can still do a lot with that instrument. And the fact that we've developed a really good relationship with our CEO, and we've actually developed a very good mutual kind of financially beneficial relationship with Corp has really helped us broaden our horizons. Think laterally in terms of how we think about investment topics. So to give you a good idea of this, how we're structured and how we're built is more like a 10-cent investment and more like a SoftBank a vision fund and that of maybe a synergistic investment fund from Cisco or Qualcomm. In the vision that we a good portion of our financial gains contributes very positively towards our bottom line for Rakuten Corp.
I had seen you mention KPIs for your fund or your job. What
Mhm.
does that look like? Because typically in a venture fund, that's about returns to LPs.
Yep, exactly. So for us, we basically return a specific amount of capital gain to our mother. And Rakuten has essentially recorded maybe I think 3 to 4% of the total net income right now is contributed by Rakuten Ventures. And this is by a company. Rakuten Ventures is a company of 5 people, so we're very effective at returning capital and developing a really good symbiotic relationship with our LP. A lot of times, corporations and corporate venture capital firms are really have a hard time developing number one that relationship and that machinery needed to make that return consistent.
Now, 4%, that's pretty big given the
Mm,
results for Rakuten. I mean, Americans may be a lot more familiar with Masayoshi Son and
mm,
SoftBank.
mm.
Maybe give kind of a scale of what Rakuten's business revenue is like.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think when I say SoftBank Vision Fund, I that's a real big hyperbole in terms of trying to build parallels. For us, we're a pretty interesting company in that we do about $12 billion of revenue a year compared to that of the many subsidiaries that SoftBank has. And even if you look at the Vision Fund, you know the Vision Fund accounts more than almost half to about 40% of their whole net income. Whereas again, we're a very small portion, 3 to 4%, but we're definitely building out an organization for our contribution ratios to increase more and more. But yes, Rakuten does about $12 billion of revenue a year. It's split pretty evenly on the top line across what we do on the fintech side. So we have an amazing fintech business where we have one of the largest trading platforms in Japan called iSpeed. We have the number one credit card company in Japan. And then we have like the number two travel company in Japan, and then we have our e-commerce marketplace. So everything actually works as a really artfully orchestrated moat and castle strategy. At where when you use the Rakuten Ichiba credit card on our marketplace, it's very, very beneficial for the user. But of course, on the company side, these things work as a natural catalyst and accelerant for us to increase our top line, and of course verticalize the cost for acquiring new customers.
Now, moving towards your actual activity
Hmm.
as a managing partner of the venture fund,
Hmm.
I really love the story of how you found Diego Oppenheimer and Algorithmia. Do you mind sharing that?
Okay, so Diego loves to talk about that as an icebreaker, but and the way that Diego talks, of course, he never like exaggerates, and it's actually to the letter. Where for me, as mentioned before, I try to invest a lot on the basis of thematic investments. And the one idea that I had very, very early on was there was two things. There was an immense drive towards, and this is a lot of the stuff that I learned in my time at Google, is that they had amazing amounts of code repositories and specifically algorithm repositories so that engineers from all over the world of the Google offices can pull from that, like the Library of Alexandria, to develop their own applications or develop internal tools that were necessary. I was thinking as an investor, why isn't there something out there as a SaaS product or some sort of other product that's billable that other bigger corporations can utilize to basically benefit from all this knowledge around the world? And specifically, a lot of the algorithms that are literally built for one use case to be published in universities and then thrown away. So I kid you not, I literally just typed, algorithm marketplace, and the third result that popped up was Algorithmia. And I emailed them because for me, like I don't have a network in venture capital. I'm not going to go up to Madrona like 4 years ago and say, hey, can I get an intro? And they're like, who are you? So I literally used the contact me page and I said, I want to talk to you guys. So that was actually the first interaction that I had with Diego and Kenny. They were like, who is this guy from Singapore? Let me find out if this can be a funny anecdote of a crazy person contacting us so I can laugh about it in the future. Oh, now he's our investor. So, so that was kind of how the story began. But obviously, what Diego and Kenya has built out is amazing of how you build out the whole DevOps operation of, basically training, scaling, and the overall maintenance and security of AI and ML. That's something that for me, that wasn't even part of my initial thesis, but they took that and the track that they built out has been amazing. It's really groundbreaking what they're doing right now.
And how do you view their competitive landscape, and where do you see it going? There are companies that are proposing to do some bits of what they offer.
Yep. I think for me, when I look at the landscape, I do believe that a lot of these guys are overfunded, and this is me actually being not diplomatic at all, and that's actually one of my takes is that as a venture capitalist, I have a very strong opinion about a lot of these companies. Like a lot of, and what happens with a lot of these ML AI companies when they're overfunded, they have like $90 million on their balance sheet. They start to internalize tools that don't need to be internalized. And in many ways, the way that I look at Algorithmia, they're building the next wave of what a Red Hat would be in 2020 and 2021 and on, in that they're trying to develop really good tool sets to loop them together so that as a developer, as an ML AI practitioner, you literally have the freedom to integrate the tools that you're used to and then be and focus on the productivity that you need to. And when you have so much funding, you start to understand how do I want to verticalize margins today and not 5 years later. And I think that's fundamentally the wrong approach. I do see that with that verticalization, a lot of these AI companies were able to get to that point much quicker, and I see a lot of great companies IPOing out. But I strongly believe that Algorithmia has a pitch perfect approach for number one, not being too competitive with the quasi competitors, but number three, doing it in the most efficient way possible. And at the same time, I think the product has the most empathy for enterprises to work with. Empathy, corporate empathy, as in um, Algorithmia, Diego and Kenya and the team have the perfect understanding of what each corporation is going through, and they perfectly modularize a product to suit those needs.
You brought up enterprises, and how much of that do you think is Diego's Microsoft breeding? Because he's an alumnus of a company that really understands enterprise and
Yeah,
has roared back because of that.
absolutely. I mean, you just hit the point so well. I mean, with Diego's overall, like he's fluent in enterprise, so he knows how to engage the superstructure, whether it's a IT company or an older fintech company, perfectly. So this is the reason why, like I've seen some of the case studies you can see on Algorithmia online, where they when they work with Toyota or the like, they're just astounded by how quickly and how with agility Kenny and Diego and the team can set up a process that helps them be productive and get to the output they want to. I really haven't seen, because just see a lot of deals. I just see a lot of enterprise companies at the same time. I haven't seen really that agility, even from some of my other portfolio companies.
And what are the other companies you like in this space that you've invested in?
Yeah. So for me, I've invested in, so Algorithm is one of them. Another company that I invested in is called Vsense. It's a company based out in Singapore. They do computer vision, but for e-commerce and fashion. They're one of the most astounding companies that I've seen, along with Algorithmia, because if you have an Android phone and you have like a Samsung or an Oppo, Vivo, or Huawei, and you open up the shopping lens, it's powered by Vsense. It's not powered by Google Lens. It's not powered by Amazon Recognition. It's powered by this company has like 60 million monthly active users that it's helping out every single and powering their searches every single month on those shopping lenses from this little red dot in Southeast Asia. And it's built by an amazing CTO and CEO, Guangdan Oliver, and they developed this amazing platform that enables very very quick recognition of the attributes of fashion and the attributes of clothes, and that's been applied to many different customer sets, from, as mentioned before, all the actual cell phone OEMs to really interesting fashion platforms like Asus and Uniqlo. That's one company, and there's a lot of other companies that we've invested in, like Send Anywhere. It's a company in Korea. It's a file transfer company in South Korea. They use immense amounts of AI and ML to develop the right routing algorithms, so that number one, when you send a file from point A to point B, you can do that while not really hurting your cogs when you actually work out your P&Ls. There's another company in San Mateo called One Signal. Well, it was Redwood now. They've moved places, but this is a push notification platform, and with like the likes of Braze and Urban Airship. But right now, 1 million developers depend on that platform. They use immense amounts of, again, ML and AI to, number one, predict their overall server costs and whatnot, but to be able to develop very automated push notification kind of functionalities to help their customers reach their customers very effectively.
Wow, One Signal is sounds a lot like the last startup I was actually active with. So
Really.
I got to take a look at them more closely. Vsense,
Mhm.
the channel partnerships that they secured, was that something you helped as an investor, or is that something they managed to secure on their own?
I want to say I want to take the credit on that so badly, because that's such an amazing partnership. But no, I mean, they did it with sheer strength of how good their product was and their flexibility in how to work with these developers and these OEMs. And like I'll give you an example. Like I can give you when they work with Samsung, and now they're powering a lot of their region's shopping lens. This was like a year and 9 month engagement just to get their SDK or API into the test phones. So it's a very durable partnership. And they developed this because, number one, Vsense itself is very, very well known in the computer vision space, but they're at the top of their game for commerce. You don't go anywhere else. And because of that, they develop their own gravity when these OEMs want to build out these products. And when Oliver came to me and said, "I want to build out this lens for smartphones," I was actually reticent because I was like, "Is this like more like window dressing? Can this become critical in the future?" And quickly, I was proven so wrong because number one, it started out as a hygiene product for a lot of these OEMs. Oh, Huawei has it. Me as Samsung should definitely have it. But now you look at what's happening with Google Lens, you look at happening with what's happening with Pinterest. It's becoming the critical portion to the consumption ladder. So I mean, not only are they visionary, but they were able to execute on that vision literally a year and a half to 2 years ahead of all the bigger players.
And what markets are they active with? Where are their users primarily located?
So Vsense right now is actually active globally. They Uh, so there's many parts to what Vsense does, but the native shopping network portion that I just talked about with the shopping lens, that's just global. They have more than 60 million month active users. Those 60 million month active users search 400 million times a month. So they literally search about 50% of what DuckDuckGo's pure search volume is on visual. So and they're only searching visually for something to buy. So that's pretty crazy in terms of the amount of influence they hold in those smartphones. And as mentioned before, they have many other businesses that deal with e-commerce sites directly and helping them do smart recommendations and do similar kind of site to search models that I talked about in the shopping lens.
That's impressive. I want to look more deeply into what they're doing. That's
Mm,
fascinating.
yep, yep.
And for geography, you're based in Singapore, but we've already talked about Algorithmia that's located in
Mhm,
Seattle, or at least founded in Seattle.
mhm,
And then One Signal is in Redwood City. And
mhm.
sounds like formerly they were in my old neighborhood in San Mateo.
Yeah.
Are you global in terms of seeking your deal flow?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think that's one of my biggest strengths is that for us, it's really important to understand what's happening all around the market. I'll give you a really good example is this is actually has to do a lot with Vsense and algorithms specifically, is that I was looking for a computer vision company and an AI ML generalist company. And when I looked for all of this, again, to be very transparent, like most of the startups that were very much in vogue in 2014-15. I one thing that I looked at and I got deep into their P&Ls is that their COGS were unworkable. So basically, they were building off of a heavy, heavy cost base, and then thinking about business models much later on in the roadmap. They simply wanted to develop this core API and whatnot. There's a really interesting perspective on this is that when I then looked at what Vsense was doing, they were able to really compress the cost base in a very innovative way, so that they were building out and they were being productive, 4 or 5 times than that of what their San Francisco peers were doing. And one of the important things was, how do I think differently about investment topics? Do I only want to focus on how good the IP could be? Or do I want to think about how sustainable the business can be from the earliest point on? And I chose the latter to think about this because, there are so many companies out there, talking about what they could do. But, what's manifesting right now is that these companies, a lot of them, were building out these products without having a proper way to monetize them. So in that perspective, that's, for me being able to look globally, I was able to do a really interesting apples to apples comparison, and then make the choice globally.
You were COVID-19 before your time because right now a lot of American VCs are learning or getting up to speed on how to do remote deals. Do you have some tips for your American colleagues out here in Silicon
I,
Valley and Seattle?
you know, I really, that's a really interesting topic because actually, when you look at my deal history, more than half to about 65% of my deals have been done without actually meeting the founder in person. Um, like the first check that I signed to them. And I did this because I was trying to prove a thesis if this was workable, in the perspective that, um, you know, for me to do global investment from Singapore, now that I've experienced everything, is one of the easiest things to do. Because number one, I can look at Southeast Asia deals, but I have to look at it on the ground just because of information latency, because of a very, very disparate market context. But when I do stuff in the US, because that latency is so low and I get access to so many networks and information, I really have no kind of reservations about if I want to touch a company in New York to if I want to touch a company in Boston. So I guess the tip would be is that I think the way that you engage the models, if you understand that vertical very well and the price points of that vertical very well, I think a lot of VCs should start to look at doing remote deals much more aggressively, because I think looking globally is still one of the vehicles that has not been touched by smaller shops. It has been touched by larger shops that, of course, we've seen, the franchise VC firms, but they're doing that at a much higher cost base, and hence they do that at a relatively more mature growth stage investment topics.
Do you see any correlation between that and what you had mentioned before about overfunded startups?
Mm-hmm.
So some of these franchise VCs, like you'd mentioned, I'd suppose maybe Sequoia Capital would be put into that as well. I mean, they're playing with big bucks and they
Yeah,
go in with pretty big funds, right? What
yeah.
what what are the advantages you have against somebody like that?
I mean, I think for me, I wouldn't put Sequoia in the same basket per se, because they've actually been really, really diligent in terms of how they've compartmentalized that platform. But for me, I've never seen a other VC firm as a competitor, especially in Southeast Asia or overall, North Asia. Just because the more money that comes into the region, everybody wins, and the more money that comes, there's more chances of companies that I have invested in and that I have not invested in becoming successful, which is again a virtuous cycle where then it brings out more liquidity out of different silos. So I've never actually understood the idea of being competitive to other VC firms. But I think what I do bring is that for us, we don't make a lot of investments a year, maybe six or about four investments a year. And those investments, we have a really good understanding of where those companies should be going, and that how they should be performing, how their product should be built out and whatnot. And a lot of times we're very aligned with the founders, and they're very surprised that we've thought that deeply about their company or their vertical.
Do you have a favorite region or country for the upcoming year in terms of looking for deals?
This is interesting. Like for me, definitely, uh, I don't, well, I'll just say this. I don't think I'll have a specific region, just because that, again, as mentioned before, and that by you, I am really, really comfortable with investing remotely. But I do think that in relation to what's happening with COVID-19 and whatnot, there will be specific verticals that I'll be looking at very, very much. There's a lot of things that are happening with, you know, uh, NLP and NLU, like the whole WaveNet text to speech industry, that could be very, very productive for society. Think about being able to field. Think about a hospital being able to field calls via a simple voice chatbot that enables you to screen for symptoms of COVID-19 without a person having to be online and take notes individually. I think there's a lot of technological innovation that could be done, and obviously private capital can be a lot of help on. So no, I don't think that there's going to be a specific region that I will focus on, um, or have more preference to. I'm going to look at more on biotechnology to see what can be done with faster screening processes or workflows. Um, I don't think that there's a lot of attention going into ML and AI in relation to like how do you make testing a lot quicker with ML and AI. I've looked at the studies. I've looked at some of the companies that do this. I think there's still a while away from actually making this a scalable and repeatable process for them to sell as a product. But definitely those things in relation to computer vision, making sure that you can recognize specific molecules and particles under a microscope in a very automated manner could be very interesting at the same time also. I'm looking also at things in relation to how do you make modeling, the practice of modeling much more affordable. One of the things that really, really opened my eyes to energy consumption was actually how energy intensive model training is for ML and AI. There's a really amazing report that NVIDIA made where they said 75% of all data center data energy consumption came from model training. It's insane. And there's another report that says, AI and ML model training has the worst carbon footprint that we've seen out of a lot of other utilities. So understanding, how do you actually develop better computing modules? When I say that, that goes from gamut to gamut. From the very, very extreme spectrum, I'm looking at photonic computing as a way to negate this, but also a lot of great innovative algorithm development that allows you to use APUs instead of GPUs to do a lot of compute, really marginalizing the cost increases in the future. So, looking at a lot of diverse places to actually touch and understand value in.
I think you made a strong case for what you're looking for to invest in. Maybe a call out on how to contact you for any of those entrepreneurs who are fulfilling those needs or deals that you're looking for.
Sure, sure. So, I mean, you can reach me on Twitter, or you can reach me in my Rakuten email. It's Saemin, Saemin .ahn at rakuten.com, Rakuten.com. And I actually, and that's one of the reasons why I love coming on these podcasts, because I get to really interact with the community. And please, I'm also very actively on Twitter. You can see me easily swear on Twitter and complain about the Fed, and at the same time complain about specific industry trends. And I'll be happy to interact with you guys.
Well, I thank you so much for joining. And I think if you swear in Korean, it probably wouldn't trigger Apple's censorship.
I want to be careful. I think Apple's becoming quite popular in Korea also. So I'll just let's end the podcast and then I can start swearing randomly.
Okay.